Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Silver Tent Radio. I'm Nikki-Marianna Hope, a Grove member of the Silver Tent, a worldwide inspiration group of women over 50. I bring together my life wisdom and listening skills with art, flower and vibrational essences, sound healing, and shamanic work. At times, we all need immediate help or someone to listen. After an initial conversation, I offer my clients ongoing phone or online support, day or night, as their need arises. My guest today is Resa Ferrier, who is based in the northeast of the USA. Resa has had a love affair with sound all her life. When she was really little, Resa climbed up onto the piano stool and started to play. She learned to read music before starting school. Resa now works with people's resonance signature, using their unique core sound for healing. Today is the 9th in our series of chats about sound in its many different forms. Good morning, Resa.
Good morning, Nikki-Marianna. Good to talk with you.
And you. Now then, we were chatting just now about the sound of children and the sound of creation.
Yes. So we started to talk about how children have this uniquely beautiful belly laugh that they do. And when you hear it, if you look around, people start smiling because there's something just so free that happens. And the children who are often silenced from events in their lives, situations that demand the stricture of silence for survival, in situations where there is safety and love that surrounds them, you sometimes can get that laugh from them, where it's you were talking about it being held, how that.
Yes. Yeah, it's contained tight inside us when we've been taught not to make noise, not to laugh, not to express emotion in any form. So, a loud laugh is absolutely forbidden. And yet you can sense this laughter bubbling under their skin. And all of a sudden, it's as if they're about to burst, and it's boom! And
Yes.
they absolutely rock with laughter for a few moments. But they may silence it again very fast. But
Right.
Nevertheless, it's bounced out.
Right. So then the sometimes that goes unnoticed. Like, people don't notice that it was held and then it only has a short life. Whereas another child might start that deep belly laugh and be rolling on the floor with that laughter until, it finally, just for breath, they have to slow down a little.
Yes.
And, it's a point where you see people drawn to the child who has that laughter that is free. And people, it's kind of like when people say, "How are you?" Some people don't always want to really know how you are. It's just a convention. So with the child who that laughter bursts out of and then they silence it, there's a sense of something not in balance, but we don't all go to try and find out. Sometimes it's circumstance where the child is in passing and we have no connection to move through that. And sometimes it's just the moment for us, we're involved in something else, and that kind of sits in our memory like a visual and an audio memory, and later it will come out and replay, and we'll want to know, why is that sticking there? Why is that? Because those sounds, in the way the sound was handled by the person, is telling us something.
Oh, yes.
So you get with children, because there tends to be less social convention than with adults, you have a place where if you go into an area with a crowd, you can tell immediately if there are children, because there's a different tenor or sound to the crowd. And if there are no children, you can tell. And you may say to me, oh, come on, how would I know if I don't see them? So the next time you go someplace in public, a large group, as you step into the group, just close your eyes for a moment. Stop walking first. Close your eyes. And then listen. And you will be able to hear whether there are children or not. Even in the fierce whispers, okay? Because how many times as parents or seeing parents with the fierce whispers, you need to hold my hand.
Yes.
We hold hands here. And then the, you know, whatever the response is can be in that same low tone by the child, but the pitch of voice for children is so different. It sings on a different level and we perceive it differently. I think, or I perceive, that's why we have an attunement to when it's a child's cry as opposed to an adult's cry.
Oh, yes.
Because there's that difference in the tone. There's a couple things it does. One, it activates primordial segments of the brain to say, protect, this is, all these different things. And then there's also just the tonal pattern, which is at a different pitching than adult voices. So it makes us respond differently. And I've lived in different cities where you hear a lot of voices in different situations. And I can remember hearing a scream and pausing and then realizing that it was like, a child going down a large slide, those kind of screams,
Yes.
And then in a different circumstance, hearing an adult scream and realizing the distinctions in the tones, and having to listen again for the adult to make sure that they were okay, or for the sound, what were the sounds that came after that, and did I need to call the police, what was that distinction. And those variations in tones, children who have to abide by situations that are dangerous for them, form a whole tonal pattern to accommodate the situation.
Yeah. So they don't stand out.
Right. But they actually are covering over what's underneath. So if you have deep listening and you're involved in deep listening, or some people say listening from the heart, or however you want to name it, but what you're doing is listening underneath the overtones or the top tones, you'll be able to hear there's something underneath. And depending on experience with that, you can actually reach more of what's going on. So when you communicate back, if you communicate on those two levels, you can actually be messaging to that child or to an adult. That doesn't happen only to children, about what you understand, and put out love and safety to the person.
I am going to have to listen very carefully to what I'm hearing from other people now, and how I'm responding.
Right.
Because I don't know whether I'm doing that or not. I know I have very deep listening skills. Yes. I know I pick up things that other people haven't even noticed are there, but I've never worked out exactly what's going on. So I must do that. That's going to be fascinating.
Yes, it used to be the Norse mythology and the Viking ways had this had that as part of their belief system, is that deep listening could take the person all the way back to the source. And so if they were, moving through different things, I mean, they used it a little differently probably, but they would sit in circle and the skald would begin the story, and there would be people positioned behind the people, because if they went that deep to listen to that, they would actually go out and pass out. So there's all different ways of
Wow.
doing it, but that was in a ceremonial or ritualistic way. But every day, just if you just think about how you listen to people and really good friends, you go, okay, now tell me the real story.
Yes, you do.
Okay, because you hear it.
Yes.
You
You
know
know
that
there
that's
is something that's not being said, but that is important.
and you know that because you listen to them differently.
Yes.
And so that idea applies in other situations too. I mean, it's not always bad news or sad news. I mean, sometimes people have this tremendous joy that they're waiting to tell people, right? So you get the flavor of that. And depending on your relationship with the person, you may say, hey, what's going on? Or you may say, do you have a surprise you're going to tell us? You know? And it doesn't mean that every moment of every day you're going to live in a deep listening mode, because that would make you kind of crazy. But it does mean that you can practice it with people that you are safe with and see how that works, and broaden those ranges that you're listening to. So when you listen to someone doing a sales pitch to you, if you really listen, you'll be able to tell if it's a truth or not. And
Oh,
people have
yes.
all different ways of doing that, but just from the sound,
Yes.
And I always laugh when somebody is selling something and they do the radio announcer voice and talk like this to sell it to you, because of course that's how you are going to buy something, because this must be a trustworthy person. I'm like, oh boy.
Instant. Whoa, danger bells, danger bells.
Yeah. And, think of it in reverse. If children have a, I don't even probably know exactly how to name it. So if children are closer to the source because they haven't built all the filters that we build in our lives, then they say that children, if you're performing, are the toughest audience, because if you're not real, they'll know it. And then
Yes.
they just pick at you, because that's not okay. You got to be real. You have to be real.
Yes.
So
Yes.
in the same way, when you're communicating with children, if you're watching them, there may be something in your undertone or that they hear that they'll respond to. So you know how we always say, well, I'm going to put a brave face on this. And you
Yes.
go in, that's not going to work, because they're going to know.
Yes. Absolutely.
So we kind of have unspoken deals we make with each other about deep listening and what we do with it. I think we have a lot more that we can do with it if we also think about deep, I guess I would call it deep communicating or deep sounding. So when you're stating your truth, it's being stated on all these levels by the tenors in your voice. And if someone is listening deeply to you, they're going to hear that support of that truth you speak. When you're uncertain and you speak it as if it is your truth, they're going to hear the uncertainty, the discussion that's happening in your own head and heart about that
Yes.
truth. And
Yes.
and so if you can own it, that that's happening, then you have someone who can be part of the discussion. It's not just in your head.
Yes. I don't know. Discussions in your head are usually pretty good. Can I
Yes.
go back a moment to, you were talking at the beginning about screams and children and, you know,
Yes.
not necessarily a fearful scream or anything.
Yeah.
When I first went to live right in the countryside, I could wake up some nights and it was near a boys' boarding school. You know, their land backed onto ours. And I'd woken up several times in the night to hear this screaming, thinking, oh my God, one of those poor boys is lost or in pain or injured in the woods. And I'd leap out of bed and my husband would lie in bed absolutely laughing himself silly and say, it's the fox. No, it isn't. It's a child from the school next door. And I'd get my wellies and coat on and a big strong torch and I'd go out and look. I never found anything. But it was, the scream of the fox was exactly the same as the scream of a young boy in distress. The fox was calling for a mate.
I guess that's its own distress, right?
Yes, yes.
That is actually a really, really interesting, because look at how many millions of people live in urban areas and their exposure to natural soundings. You even see it with children who've never been like out in the natural world. They've grown up in an urban area and only had parks, you know, small parks or
Yes.
large parks, but still a park. And then they, you know, just the absolute absence of sounds that can happen for a moment. So if you're I mean, I have lived in more urban areas for years. I grew up in a rural area, and I can remember I would be in the woods, and I was a kid, a little kid, but we were allowed to go anywhere. I'd be in the woods and all of a sudden everything would go silent. And you would freeze and
Yeah.
look, your eyes would look around to see, okay, that's a big predator. Am I prey for that or not? Because there were bears and things near us. So it was always that, okay, what's my next move? And then, you know, like it would pause and then everything would come back. It was like somebody was doing a recording and they hit pause and there would be like a beat, 1, 2, 3, and then all the sound would come back.
And you froze during that pause.
Right. Looking, trying to see if I saw anything.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you know, those kind of cues, actually think about that. They're mirrored in our community world, because if you're, I'm trying to think. Well, the easiest place for me to think about it is like being in a small bar. When I remember way back, I used to be a bartender, and you don't know all the patrons yet. You know, you're new. Someone opens the door, and there's absolute silence for
Ah,
1, 2, 3, and then the talking starts again, as if to
yes.
hide everybody, right? And you go, "Oh, that's not good."
I can remember experiencing that in my late teens.
Mm.
Um, I was in Northern Ireland for the first time. In fact, it was Dublin. And I'd only ever been to pubs in England where everyone was accepted, children, dogs, you know, the lot. And I was looking for somebody and I walked into this pub. Deathly silence. And everyone turned to look at me. And what's going on here? What's going on here? So, you know, I just ignored it and said, have you seen so-and-so? And they said, actually, you'd be better off outside. What? No, I'm just looking for so the person found me and we went outside. I'm sorry, you can't go in there. That's a men's only pub. Really? Do such things exist? I said, yes. And most of the pubs around here are men only. You cannot go in there, which is what that deathly silence was about.
Wow.
There was a part of me that was furious, and there was a part of me that, oh my God, I've really done the wrong thing to go in. But there was no sign saying men only.
Right.
You had to know it, or else go in and experience the deep and uninviting silence that you got.
Wow. Wow. That's that's how, you know, you get it is how you bring that wall, and you can see how that communication happened with each other in that pub without sound. They formed a solid wall to
Yes.
shut you out. And we that's why we all know the times we've had a similar experience where it's not a men only, but we walk into a group or a situation or a place, and the people all have a connection, right? And we are there and we don't. And then
Yes.
someone says, hey, can I help you with something? But they don't say, hey, can I help you with something? They say, hey, can I help you with something? So the tone we use when people come into an environment where we rule is important, because it sets the tone for the group we belong to respond.
Yes.
So we start with children who have this freedom of sound. Even when there's an oppression to them being able to sound, when they're in a place that has a mode of safety before that shell becomes hardened, that sound can punch through, that laughter, that shout, whatever it is.
And I love the way it sort of gurgles up right from their belly and then fills the whole of their body.
Yes, yes. And it's, you know, they make TingShaws that when they sound, they call them joy. And there's a place in Tibet. A friend of ours went there and brought back TingShaws for us. And he said, I brought these specifically because they fashion these to be the sound of joy in all its aspects. So, you know, as you put the symbols together and make the sound, the tonal qualities change. But those TingShaws are so beautiful that you can't help but smile when you hear them.
Wow.
And that always reminds me when children laugh with that belly laugh. And in the dark moments, that sound I think it has healing properties. So when my mind is feeling broken, that sound helps to heal it.
Oh, yes. Every time. Yeah. And on that note, we're going to finish, Resa. Okay. It's been fun talking to you. And thank you. Where can people contact you?
You can contact me through Facebook at Spirit Sounding, or just search for Resa Ferrier.
Thank you very much. Until next time, Resa. Bye-bye.
Bye.